What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. So around a decade or so ago, I was trying to watch all of IMDb's top 250 films of all time. And in fact, I actually made a list of my own top 250 favorite films of all time back in 2014. Now, keep in mind, this was something that I started in 2012. And it took me a couple years to actually come up with 250 favorite films because, again, it's very difficult. So a decade later, I was like, you know what? Let me do this again and see just how much it's changed. And I will put down below the Letterboxd link for my top 250 favorite films of all time back in 2014, and then, as well as this list down the line. So keep in mind, I did do my top 25 favorite films of all time list in 2021. The link is down below on my playlist, and I also did last year, broken 3 parts. I did my top 26 to 100 favorite films of all time. So this video is going to kick off my top 101 to top 250 favorite films of all time, but it's going to be broken into 3 parts. This is kicking it off with my number 201 to 250, and then I'll be doing my number 200 to 151, and then the last part will be my number 150 to 101. So I'm going to be going backwards. I'm going to be starting with 250, and then to wrap it up with this video will be my number 201. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it regardless, is that keep in mind my list is going to be much different from yours, and that's what's great about film as an art form. It is subjective. So I do look forward to seeing your list down below of your top 250 favorite films, or heck, even maybe top 100 or even top 10. So let me know in the comment section down below. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking things off with my number 250, that is Hannah. This is a Joe Wright film starring Saoirse Ronan, and I hated this film with a passion the first time I saw it. In fact, it's what got me started in terms of reviewing films. But I couldn't get this film out of my head, and over the years I've rewatched it more and more, and I actually rewatched it recently, and I just love the film, man. It's like a fairy tale action thriller in the vein of the Bourne films, but at the same time, it does make a name for itself with a really, really catchy soundtrack, great performances, great score, great cinematography. I love the action choreography, and it's just a film with very intriguing characters as well, and a really interesting opening and ending scene and the tie-in of such. So I really like this film, and that's why it's my number 250. Next up, my number 249, we have House. So this is not a film for everyone. It is a kooky horror comedy, but let me tell you, this is the film that is a go-to in terms of watching with friends on a movie night. It is so, so good. If you're an open-minded individual, I would highly recommend you check this film out because House is so good. And that's why it's my number 249. Next up, another film that also is a really good movie night movie and would probably pair really well with House. We have Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This is my favorite Terry Gilliam film. Johnny Depp is really good in this film. This is definitely a film that you need to be a certain kind of viewer because the film is very trippy. It puts you inside the mindset of these characters that are, let's face it, high throughout the entire film. So it really elucidates that feeling. And it's a really, really good film. It's gotten better with each viewing for me. Like, this is similar to Hannah, a film that when I first saw it, I wasn't a big fan of it, but I decided to give it a second chance. And I'm glad that I did because second and third viewing, I've liked it each time more and more. And I look forward to watching it again pretty soon. So, yep, that is my number 248, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Next up, we have a film that's similar to these other films, and you will see this throughout this video and the other 2 parts. This is another film that really grew on me over time. I wasn't a fan of it the first time, but with each subsequent viewing, I've really grown to love it. And we have 247, Gattaca. Yeah, Gattaca, I quite like. The score is amazing. Ethan Hawke is really, really good, and Uma Thurman as well. And I just think the concept is fascinating, and I think that the way it's executed really does a good job of alluring the viewers into the world building, which is also really fascinating. And it's very scientific. In fact, how I came across this film in the first place was watching it in a science class in high school. So yeah, it's a really good film, and it just simply gets better with each viewing. And that's why it's on my list at number 247. Next up, my number 246, we have In the Heat of the Night. Quite a good film. It is not my favorite film of 1967, but at the same time, I understand why it won Best Picture because it is an important film. I do think that everyone should watch it at least once. The mystery itself, yes, is quite simple, and yes, you can probably see the twist coming a mile away, but it's not really about the twist, more so about the characters and the filmmaking, and both are incredible. So I really like In the Heat of the Night. That's why it's on my list at number 246. Next up, my number 245, this is the same director that did Hannah, Joe Wright, and we have Atonement. Yeah, Atonement's really good. It has one of the best long takes I've ever seen. It is a war romance, and it does a good job of combining the two genres. And let me tell you, the twist ending here, whew, so good. It really does a good job of recontextualizing the entire film. And this is another film that stars Saoirse Ronan and also stars James McAvoy, Keira Knightley. Really good cast. If you like period pieces and you also want a period piece that is quite thought-provoking, this is the film for you. I really like Atonement, and that's why it's on my list at number 245. Next up, my number 244. This is a film I've only seen one time, but it was a blind buy, actually, from a Criterion Hall. And I'm glad that I blind bought it because even though I've only seen it once so far, I haven't been able to get it out of my head, and that is The Piano Teacher. Yeah, not for everyone. Not for everyone by a long shot. But it's a very bizarre film that really does a good job of encapsulating the viewpoint of these characters. Like, you understand them even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're doing throughout this film. And it's a very, very dark film. Not for everyone. I really want to preface that, but it is a film that I do think for film buffs, everyone should watch it at least once, because it does a really good job of tackling some important themes. So yeah, I really like The Piano Teacher, and I look forward to rewatching it. That's why I have it as my number 244. Next up, my number 243. This is a film I actually recently rewatched in theaters because of its 25th anniversary, I believe, and that is Run Lola Run. I really like this film. It is only 80 minutes long, I believe, but it does a really good job of right away throwing you into the mix of this lead character, and the editing is very kinetic, the soundtrack, the score, the lead performance. It's just an overall quite an entertaining film, and it's also quite thought-provoking as well. There's a film I also own called Blind Chance, and Blind Chance definitely inspired Run Lola Run, but I do have to say, as of the filming of this video, which is September 14th of 2024, I do like Run Lola Run more, and that's why it's made my list. Next up, my number 242. This is another Criterion blind buy. We have To Die For. This is a Gus Van Sant film. The same director did Good Will Hunting, and it stars Nicole Kidman. And let me just say this. When I read the premise, I was like, you know what? I am going to blind buy this. And I'm so glad that I did, because I loved it a lot. Like, so much so that, I mean, it made my list, even though I only saw this a couple months ago. Yeah, it's just a really, really well-crafted film. It's a great combination of thought-provoking and entertaining, and Nicole Kidman definitely delivers one of her best performances in this film. So I can't wait to rewatch it. That's why I'm glad that I bought it. Next up, this is my number 241. This is a film that, I'll just say it, I love it, but the 4K transfer is controversial, to say the least. My number 241, we have Terminator 2 Judgment Day. One of the best action films of all time, no question. I will never forget the first time that I saw this about a decade ago. It's a film that just keeps on giving. Like, every time I watch it, I somehow, some way like it more. I personally prefer the theatrical cut, but I do understand why other people might like the other two cuts. I would recommend, it's dicey to say this, but I would recommend getting the Blu-ray over the 4K, because the 4K, they DNR'd it like a lot. It looks very, very modernized. Like, it looks like it's not even shot on film. So I would recommend the Blu-ray, but I own the 4K, so yeah. But again, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, love this film, and that's why it is my number 241. Next up, we have another Criterion blind buy, and you're going to hear that a lot because I do a lot of Criterion hauls, and I always try to get one or two blind buys. But my number 240, we have Cure. This is a 1997 film that when I read the premise, I was like, yep, this is right on my alley. And when I saw it, I was like, yes, I'm glad that I blind bought this. This is just, it's a really, really good film. It clearly inspired a lot of American films. I'm not going to say which ones, but there's one in particular that stars Naomi Watts in the early 2000s that definitely was inspired by this film. It's a very eerie film, and I really like the sound design. I love the cinematography, how it's very much so emphasizing long distance. It's a really good film, and I love the tension that it builds. It's quite a good detective story, and if you've been sleeping on this film, I would highly recommend you pick this up because it's one-of-a-kind film. That's why it's my number 240. Next up, my number 239, we have Manchester by the Sea. This was one of my favorite films of 2016. It is the perfect combination of drama and comedy. Like, the comedy makes me laugh whenever I watch it, but the drama also is like a gut punch every single time. And also, this was the film that, even though I saw Lucas Hedges in other films, this is the one where I was like, oh wow, this person's someone to look out for. Casey Affleck gives one of, if not his best performances, and Michelle Williams also is incredible. There's one scene in particular between Michelle Williams and Casey Affleck that every time it's like, oh, it's so good. The drama is just so good. One of my favorite films about Boston as well. And yeah, I love Manchester by the Sea, and that's why it's my number 239. Next up, my number 238. This is a film that I think I first saw in early 2015, but this is a film that is not for everyone, and it got mixed reviews across the board when it first came out, and that is Only God Forgives. Holy cow. Over the years, I've really come to terms with the fact that, yes, I can appreciate dialogue-driven heavy films, but this is one of those films where I was like, holy cow, like, even though there's not that much dialogue, I'm really loving the visuals. And the visual storytelling here is really interesting. It's very heavy on symbolic storytelling, and at the same time, there's just so much emphasis on the score, which is just really good. Like, Cliff Martinez delivers one of his best scores. Ryan Gosling, I enjoyed his performance, and it's a film that really tackles a lot of themes where it's like, oh wow, that's hard to watch in terms of especially the violence. But it's a film that if you enjoy visual storytelling, especially cinematography, this is definitely a film to watch. I really liked it, and yeah, that's why it's my number 238. Next up, my number 237, we have one of my favorite Steven Spielberg films, and that is Minority Report. This is a film that gets better with each viewing, and I think that Tom Cruise did such a great job. And this is also a film that it delivers exposition in a very smart way. Like, I love how Colin Farrell, like, when he's introduced, he's utilized as the character that is almost like a, emphasis on what the audiences are. And I liked that. I think that that was a really smart choice. And it's also a smart blend of, like, sci-fi and noir. And if you see my other lists, I love the Blade Runner films. I love when a film is able to combine those two genres in particular, and Minority Report does, and it's consistently entertaining too. A popcorn munching film, but at the same time is thought-provoking. I love Minority Report. That's why it's on this list. Next up, this is a film, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to show the front cover because the front cover in itself is a spoiler, but my number 236 is Audition. So this is a film that, go into it knowing nothing. Don't look at the front cover. Don't look at the premise. Just watch this film. If it's on streaming or if it's on physical media, just blind buy. Just click it. This is a film that is a slow burn, but it builds to a final 15 minutes that literally catapulted an entire genre. I'm not going to say which genre because to say that genre also would be a spoiler. Go into this film as blind as possible. Just know it is hard to watch in some instances, but it is such a good film, especially if you like horror films. Audition is one of the best, and yeah, why I have this film on my list. But please go into it knowing as little as possible. So that was my number 236. My number 235. This is the film that I rewatched recently. I actually saw it twice this year already. Once on 4K and once actually in theaters because it turned 20, and that is Shaun of the Dead. It's the film that catapulted Edgar Wright in regards to filmmaking, like films in particular. And Shaun of the Dead is it's great. It gets better with each viewing. And it's kind of funny because I remember I saw it around the same time as Zombieland. And Zombieland I loved right away. And Shaun of the Dead I was kind of like lukewarm. I thought it was good, but didn't love it. But over the course of time, it's funny because Zombieland I now think is solid, but Shaun of the Dead I think is fantastic and just near perfect. I always hear people talk about how comedy, doesn't really need to have good cinematography or good score, and I would like to argue heavily on that matter, but in particular using this trilogy as a guide where it's like, no, you can have very good cinematography in comedies. You can have a very good score in comedies. You just got to look at these films. Just don't be lazy about it. And Shaun of the Dead showcases that it's not. This is a great film, a perfect combination of horror and comedy, and that's what you'll also notice. A lot of these films that I like are ones that are hybrids, and Shaun of the Dead definitely is. It's a really good film. Highly recommend Shaun of the Dead. Next up, my number 234. This is a film called M. It came out in 1931, and it's definitely one of my favorite films of the 1930s, and really did a lot in regards to international cinema. It's a drama, but it's dealing with some very interesting themes that you wouldn't think would be tackled during this time period, but they were, and it's very, very good. I would highly recommend it. Peter Lorre delivers a great performance, so please check out M. it's a classic for a reason, and that's why I have it as my number 234. Speaking of classics, my number 233, we have Singing in the Rain. So yeah, this is one of my favorite musicals, and I think that watching on 4K in particular, it's excellent. I love the colors, I love the costume design, the makeup. It's one of the best 50s films for sure. And if you like musicals and you've been sleeping on this film, highly recommend you watch this film. So that's my number 233. Next up, my number 232, we have BlacKkKlansman. So BlacKkKlansman is a really, really good film. It's one of my favorite Spike Lee films. I think it's one of my favorite films of 2018. And just in general, like, it is, going back to what I was saying about other movies, this is a really good combination of popcorn entertainment with thought-provoking content as well. Like, there are a lot of themes that are tackled where it's like, oh wow, like, it's tackled in a very intriguing way. And I also think that Spike Lee's directing here is top-notch. John David Washington, Adam Driver, they deliver really good performances, and I think their chemistry together is also quite good. So I loved this film, and that's why it is my number 232. Next up, my number 231. I don't own it yet on physical media, but I do look forward to picking it up on 4K down the line, and that is my number 231, High Noon. This is a film that's a Western, and I actually rewatched recently because I was doing a top 10 Western films of all time, which you guys can check that out on my top 10 playlist. But anyways, High Noon, I'm glad that I rewatched it, because when I saw it a decade ago, I thought it was good, but rewatching, I genuinely loved it. I really do think that, it taking over the course of an hour and actually being filmed in real time was a very smart choice. Like, you feel the tension. It's quite palpable, and also the themes and messages are very, very interesting. And if you also dive into the politics of the time, it makes it all the more interesting. I loved High Noon. And yeah, it's one of my favorite Westerns and just films in general, and that's why it is my number 231. And next up we have It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Yeah, I love this film. This is another great example of how comedies can actually be incredibly well shot and also have a very interesting score. This was shot on 70 millimeter. Yeah, a 70 millimeter. Imagine a film today being a comedy shot on 70 millimeter, let alone 35 millimeter. Yeah, this film's insane. It's also 163 minutes, the theatrical cut. Like, it is an epic film in regards to its length and its scope, and also just its ensemble cast. It's insanity. I know this film came out before The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but the way I would pitch this film is, imagine The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but in a comedy. And that's the best way to pitch it. Like, it is a really good film, and it gets better with each viewing. I think personally that's hilarious, but even if you don't like the comedy, the way the characters are bantering back and forth, the way the filmmaking really just plays out and really focuses on a lot of wide angle shots with, emphasizing the environment, you can't help but love this film. I'm so glad that I own this film, and I do own this film on Blu-ray, but it is the 4K restoration, and it comes with the two versions, the general release, which is the one that is 163 minutes, and it also comes with the extended cut, which is 197 minutes long. So maybe I'll watch that one at some point in time, but as of the filming of this video, the theatrical version is my go-to, and it is also the one that made this list. So that was my number 230. Next up, my number 229. This is a film that's perfect to watch when it's a wintry, cold day, snowing in particular, and that is The Thing, 1982. One of my favorite John Carpenter films, if not my favorite. It is just a really, really good film. It's atmospheric, it's tense, it's suspenseful, and the body horror is really good. It's got some of the best practical effects I've ever seen, and yeah, I love this film, and that's why I made this list. Next up, this is a film that I don't own just yet, but I do plan on picking up the next Kino Lorre sale, and that is The Producers, which came out in 1967. This is my favorite Mel Brooks film. I saw it a decade ago, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Like, I respected it. I thought it was solid-ish. But I decided to rewatch it this year, and I'm glad that I did, because 10 years later, I loved this film. I genuinely loved this film. I think that the story is really, really interesting. It's also hilarious. The acting is really good. I just think that there are scenes that not only make me laugh, but the filmmaking is quite good. And even in regards to talking specifically filmmaking, I do think it's the best filmmaking that Mel Brooks has really given us. So it was his debut film, and to this day, I haven't seen a film of his that has matched that quality. But I really like this film, and that's why I made my list. Next up, my number 227, we have On the Waterfront, which is a film that not only won Best Picture, deservingly so, but it is a film that is rifling with a lot of interesting themes, especially if you know the politics of the time and with what was going on. It makes it all the more fascinating. But not only just that, Marlon Brando's performance here is incredible. Streetcar Named Desire, which he also starred in, and this film are like the two films that, when you look at method acting and just modern day acting in general, these are the two films that really come to mind in regards to, oh, this is what kind of started that. Because prior to this film, and prior to Streetcar Named Desire, acting was a lot different. If you've seen any films prior to 1950, there were a lot of differences that you'll notice. It was more stage acting as opposed to, like this kind of style that we now know today, where it's like more emphasizing realism. So I love this film, but it's also just a film that in regards to history and filmmaking, it's all the more impactful. So I love this film. I would highly recommend it to everybody. Next up, this is a film that really changed me in regards to like films in regards to like 2016, where it's like, oh yeah, there are certain films that really made me look at the world as like, oh wow, the world is not black and white, the world is gray. And this is a film that really kickstarted that, and that is the film Little Children. Yeah, I know I own 2 copies. It's because when I went to the record store and I saw this, was there, it actually came with 2 covers of it as well as 2 discs. So I had an extra DVD cover lying around, so I just put the cover art, like the extra one and the extra disc, and so now I have 2 of these. I'm hoping this film gets a Blu-ray release at some point, because the DVD it's solid, but I know this film was very well shot, and I can definitely see that if it gets a Blu-ray release, like really showcasing that. Thomas Newman gives a great score. I love Kate Winslet's performance, Patrick Wilson, Jackie Earle Haley, Jennifer Connelly, just a really, really good ensemble, and just a film that is really thought-provoking too. It doesn't get enough discussion. Like, there are other films such as American Beauty, which is, as of the film of this video, my favorite film of all time. There are like films like that get more recognition, but this film, I think that it's quite under the radar these days, which is a shame. So this is a calling card to say, watch this film. It's really good. Next up, my number 225, we have The Wolf of Wall Street. So I own 2 copies because some of my friends don't have 4K players, so I still own the Blu-ray, and this is the upgrade of the 4K, but the 4K, it doesn't come with the Blu-ray as well, so that's why I own 2 copies. But yeah, Wolf of Wall Street, similar to some of these other films I mentioned, this is a film that I thought was solid when I first saw it, but when I started dating my wife years ago, this was one of those films that I decided to rewatch with her. And I'm glad that I did, because I feel like with each subsequent viewing, it's gotten better and better. And now I'm like, I absolutely love this film. It's a really good example of a film that combines comedy and drama in an effortless way, whilst at the same time really diving into economics and capitalism, which, speaking of capitalism, this film, I don't know how, but a lot of individuals, unfortunately, look at this film as like a embracing of capitalism, embracing of like, oh yeah, money's good, money's everything. And it's like similar to Wall Street, which came out in the 80s and, was an Oliver Stone directed film starring Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. Similar to that film, this film just gets misinterpreted. Like, it's actually critiquing capitalism, like, especially the third act. Like, I feel like it makes it all the more obvious, but nonetheless, I love this film. I think it's really, really good. It's a Martin Scorsese film that it's 3 hours long, but it flies by. If you've been sleeping on this film, I would highly recommend it. Just do know, though, it is a film that has a lot of language and a lot of nudity. So just know yourself, and if you can handle that, I would highly recommend this film. Next up, it's the opposite end of the spectrum. It's a squeaky clean film. We have my number 224, Shaun the Sheep movie. So when I first heard about this film, I was like, I'm probably not going to watch it. In 2015, that was my mindset. But last year, I heard that the film was 100% visual storytelling, and that, of course, it's claymation. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to check this film out. And I'm glad that I did, because the 100% visual storytelling is great. I also love the claymation. I love the characters. Like, the fact that I cared about these characters, and even though they're not talking at all, makes it all the more, really, really, really good. I also love the film references. Like, they reference The Night of the Hunter and like Taxi Driver in very funny ways. Like, the movie references here are very clever. And it's just a film that really put a smile on my face. And I can't wait to watch when I have kids, like, down the line. Like, this is a film that I can definitely see myself watching many more times. I've already seen it twice, and yeah, I love this film. Next up, we have another comedy. My number 223, we have Hot Fuzz. That's right, the second entry in the Cornetto trilogy. Shaun of the Dead combines horror and comedy. Hot Fuzz combines action and comedy in a seamless way. I mean, I just watched this film, a week or 2 ago? Like, and it's just, it gets better and better with each viewing. I love the comedy, but I think the action scenes are also really good, and the editing is just razor sharp. I also love the score, the characters. There's a lot to appreciate about this film. Again, if you've been sleeping on this film and you're someone that's like, oh, comedies, they're not really well shot, well, this will change your mind as well, because it's a really well shot film, and yeah, it's one of my favorites. Next up, my number 222. This is a film that I saw for the first time a decade ago, and I thought it was good, but I rewatched it recently, and I liked it much more, and I definitely appreciate it a lot. That is Rashomon, which came out in 1950. This film, in regards to storytelling, with how it's structured, like non-linear storytelling, but also showcasing perspective and how different perspectives will really emphasize different outcomes of how characters are perceiving the situations. This is one of the first films to do that, and that's why you'll hear the term the Rashomon effect. It's because of this film. It's a really, really good film. I am glad that I own it on Blu-ray, and it's only 88 minutes long. I do think that it gets better on second viewing, but I do think it's a necessity to watch. Like, if you love film as an art form, this is one of those ones where it's like, you have to see it to believe it. It's really good. And next up we have... Let me pull it up. We have The Bourne Ultimatum. So, The Bourne Ultimatum, it is one of my favorite action films. I think that this is the culmination of the Bourne trilogy, which, yes, I know I own all 5, but that's just because it was a lot cheaper to buy all 5 as opposed to the 3. But anyways, this is a really, really good way to, like, cap the series. Like, it was very satisfying, but at the same time, just so kinetic. Like, it's nonstop action, but it also gives that propulsive editing that we all know and love. And I think that it's also a really good showcase of how shaky camera work, quick cut editing can be done well. You just have to have the right editor and the right director behind the camera. And this is one of those films. The other two, The Bourne Identity and Bourne Supremacy, they are also really good, but I really think that The Bourne Ultimatum somehow, some way, takes things to the next level, and that's why I have it on my list. Highly recommend it. Next up, at number 220, we have Munich, which is a 2005 film directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Eric Bana. It is one of those films that I don't come back to too often because it is quite hard to watch, but it is a film that really stuck the landing with me the 2 times that I've seen it so far, and I just think that it gets better with each viewing. And yes, it's a long film, but it's a film that is, in my opinion, a necessity to watch because it is based on a true story, and in true Spielberg fashion, it is riveting from start to finish. Highly recommend you watch Munich. There's a reason why I got a Best Picture nomination when it came out. But yeah, that was my number 220. Next up, my number 219. This is a film that I've been putting off for years, and I was kicking myself when I finally saw it last year, and that is my number 219, Inherent the Wind, which came out in 1960. And this is a film that's about the famous monkey trial. And I think that this film does a really good job of encapsulating both sides of the aisle in regards to the trial. And it does it in a very respectful way, which I think is also all the more impactful as to why it has a lasting impact all these decades later. And I just think that the way it showcases how, like, you know, different viewpoints, just not really liking things that you might not necessarily understand, or also things that this film tackles, and just also how you might not necessarily agree with someone's viewpoint, but how you can still accept them as a person. And that's something that I think is important. And even in today's day and age, especially, I think it's something that is important to watch. I think everyone should watch this film, especially in school. And yeah, that's why it's my number 219. Speaking of based on true stories, and also, in my opinion, a film that's a necessity to watch, especially in schools, we have Dark Waters. So this film came out in 2019, and holy cow, it was one of my favorite films in 2019, and I just feel like with each viewing, I like it more and more. It's a film that really makes me personally quite angry, but I'm also able to appreciate the filmmaking aspects. I think Mark Ruffalo delivers an incredible performance, and I think that Anne Hathaway also, as the wife character, does a really good job with it. Like, it's a character that easily could have just been like one note, but there is some nuance to her. And I also think that the score, the atmosphere of the cinematography, there's just a lot to really appreciate about this film. If you like based on true story films, I would highly recommend this because it tackles it in such an interesting, complex way. And it will also follow, in terms of, like, if you were to watch it with friends as a part of a movie night, I would highly recommend watching this paired with Spotlight. Both films also happen to star Mark Ruffalo. Highly recommend this film. Next up, my number 217. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we have another Gus Van Sant film that is Good Will Hunting. what a film. What a film. I loved this film. Matt Damon, Robin Williams, Ben Affleck, Casey Affleck, they're also in this film. It's a really good film. Like, if you like dramas, this is definitely one of the best of the 90s. There's a reason why I got a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. I love that ending. I think that it's quite satisfying. I do think that, and I've said this before, but as much as I love the ending, I do think that the last minute or two, when it switches from score to soundtrack, does kind of, turn me the wrong way, but at the same time, everything that came before it, I absolutely love. And I think that it's a very satisfying film, for sure. Highly recommend this film. Next up, we have our number 216. We have Stanley Kubrick film, Paths of Glory. Yeah, this is one of the best war films. The ending is so sad, as a heads up, but, like, it's so good. It's so good. Like, definitely one of the best 1950s films as well. And Kirk Douglas delivers one of, if not his best performances in this film. Next up, this is a film that even if you're not like a hardcore like film buff or critic like myself, I think you can still appreciate this film. But it does help that if you love the theater experience, that you'll probably love this film. And that is my number 215, Cinema Paradiso, which came out in 1988. I own both cuts of this film. It has the theatrical and the director's cut, but I've only seen the theatrical cut. I've seen the theatrical cut now twice, so I do need to watch the director's cut at some point, but the theatrical cut is just, it's so good. I love the score. Ennio Morricone delivers one of his best. I love the character interactions. The lead character also is just quite fascinating, and again, the whole film revolves around this kid that loves film so much, especially the theater experience. So, like, again, I have a soft spot for that because I love the theater experience, and I think that this film, especially now that it's like, the fear of losing theaters is upon us, it's one of those things that watching this film, it's like, yeah, like, this is something that's special. Like, I hope it doesn't go away, and this film is a comfort film for that. Next up, my number 214. This is a film that I do not own yet. I do look forward to picking up the Blu-ray pretty soon. And I saw it once back in, I think it was early 2016, and I thought it was good, but I didn't really remember it. This year I decided to rewatch it, and that film is The Secret in Their Eyes, which came out in 2009. Let me just say this. This is a film that you want to go into as blind as possible, but I also might add that one thing I will say, that if you are someone that loves filmmaking, I'm going to say this and only this, and I think that you'll want to watch this film. This is one of the best long takes I've ever seen. I'm just going to say the shot starts outside of a stadium, and it somehow goes inside the stadium, and then it follows characters walking around, we'll say. Like, it's insanity, and it's all in one take, or at least it's made to look like one take, and it's really, really impressive. As far as I know, it's a one long take, but it could have been, like, stitched together, but it came out in 2009, so part of me is like, no, it's probably one long take, but, like, it's just, the way that it's shot is just mind-blowing. So, that alone, it's like, check this film out. Do not check out the American remake, though. The American remake is not good in the slightest. Watch the original, The Secret in Their Eyes, which came out in 2009. Highly recommend it. And next up, we have another international film, and to be honest with you, I was fighting back and forth in terms of, like, the placement of these two films, because they're both films that I saw in, like, 2016, 2017, and they both were, in my eyes at the time, like, solid to good, but didn't really stick with me. But now that I've rewatched both this year, they both happen to stick with me, and that is my number 213, which is Incendies. It is a Denis Villeneuve film, the same director that did, like, Sicario, the Blade Runner 2049, the Dune films. He's a great director. And Incendies, I've always heard people say that it's their favorite Denis Villeneuve film, and, like, again, because I had only seen it once prior, I was like, I guess I can respect that, but I don't really see it. But now, having rewatched it, I can see why people have this as their number one. It's incredible. The way that it builds up to the final twist is just like, oh, like, you want to take a shower after watching this film. And I mean that in the best way possible, because it's thought-provoking. Like, I rewatched it, like, a month ago, and I still am thinking about this film. I can't wait to pick it up on Blu-ray. It is a really good film. Highly recommend you check it out. That's my number 213. Next up, my number 212. This is a film that I own on DVD, but it is coming out in 4K in November. I think it's November. Or no, it might have came out last month. Either way, November is when I'm picking it up, and that is Happiness. This was a DVD that I picked up for $2, but it was worth $40 for a long time. That is until it was announced this year, 2024, that it's coming out on 4K and Blu-ray. So this DVD is going to be worthless. But this is one of those films that I can't wait to watch on 4K because it is such a good film. It's an uncomfortable film. Like, it's very uncomfortable. I think this film and the film Little Children, you watch them combined, like, you're going to be like, what did I just watch? Especially with Happiness. Like, this is a film that it's awkward, but it also has some, like, really dark humor in it. Like, that ending in particular, it's like, it's darkly hilarious. But it's not going to be a film for everyone because it's tackling an uncomfortable theme. That's all I'm going to say. But it's a really, really good film. And one of my favorite films that tackles the suburban lifestyle. But yeah, that was Happiness. And next up, we have Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. This was a film that was a blind buy because I was looking at like the cover years ago and I was like, that looks like a really cool cover. It's also directed by Paul Schrader. Let me check this film out. And I'm glad that I did because it has some of the best cinematography I've seen of the 1980s. Like, holy cow, this film is gorgeous. The score by Philip Glass is also gorgeous. There's actually a film that I might be talking about next that, let's just say that film actually utilized the score that was in this film. And Mishima is just such a great film. It doesn't get talked about enough, but it is a very, very unique biopic. And that's why I would highly recommend it. And next up, we have a film that I originally saw, what was it, like 12 years ago in class, and I thought it was just, all right, but I decided to rewatch it because I was doing a Peter Weir ranking video, so I was like, you know what, let me rewatch it, and I rewatched it, and I liked it so much that I actually decided to pick it up on 4K a couple months later when it was released, and that film is The Truman Show. I love The Truman Show. I think it's great, and like I just mentioned, Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, the score for that is so great that at the very end of this film, a certain piece of music that was used in Mishima is actually utilized at like the last scene of The Truman Show, and it works really well. Like, I understand why they decided to do that, but yeah, Jim Carrey, this is one of his best performances. I think the storytelling, the concept, the premise, everything about it is just really good, and also it's only 102 minutes, flies by. It's the same writer that actually wrote Gattaca, and yeah, he has a knack for telling like these interesting premises that are developed in a very, really, like, very, very good way. Like, I can't talk positively enough about this film. Watch The Truman Show if you've been sleeping on it, and also try to go into it as blind as possible. Love this film. Next up, we have a film that I've seen on pretty much every single format, including finally this year I saw in theaters, and that is Alien. So, yeah, what can I say? I mean, this film, it came out in 1979. It really catapulted Ridley Scott into stardom, as well as Sigourney Weaver, and it started an entire franchise. And to this day, there hasn't been a single entry in said franchise that has been able to match the prowess of this film. I love Alien. I think it is a great combination of sci-fi and horror, and it just does a really good job of having a slow burn pace that has a very fascinating payoff. So, highly recommend this film, and what can I say? I love Alien. Next up, we have Lady Vengeance. This is part of a trilogy, the Vengeance trilogy, which is also Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and Lady Vengeance. And this may or may not be the last time you heard me talk about Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Hint, hint. But anyways, Lady Vengeance, I loved. I think that it was great. And I also think that I'm glad that I own the Blu-ray in particular because from what I understand, the theatrical cut, it doesn't have like the fade to white, which is like a certain version, which I saw it for the first time, and I was like, holy cow, this is great. Because the film, it slowly fades to white. And I think that thematically, it works perfectly, especially with how the story plays out. Again, it's a very fascinating film. Park Chan-wook's directing is some of my favorite, just in general. Like, I think he is one of those directors that is very consistent, and I happen to love his directing. And I think the characters here are very complex. This is just in general a complex film with multi-layered characters. So highly recommend Lady Vengeance, and that's why I made my list. Next up, we have another film in regards to similar to like The Thing, 1982, a film that you want to watch as soon as it's cold out, as soon as it's like snowy out, and that is The Revenant. Yeah, one of my favorite films of 2015. Some of the best cinematography you'll ever see. Just also incredible action scenes. It's a Western. It's a survival film. It's long. It's brutal. It's incredible to watch. Highly recommend this film. DiCaprio did such a good job. And I love the fact that most of, if not all, was shot on location, which is like awesome. A really, really good blockbuster that also happened to has art house sensibilities. In particular, the final like 10 minutes really reminded me a lot of like the TV show Hannibal in the best way possible. So I love The Revenant. That's why it's my number 207. Next up, my number 206, we have Bonnie and Clyde, which came out in 1967 and was part of the new wave of films that had a lot of violence that was really going against the Hays Code. Like, now that the Hays Code was disbanded, filmmakers were able to actually utilize a lot of artistic techniques. And this film in particular has a high volume of like fast cut editing, but that combined with like the blood squibs of this film are really, really good. I love the performances. I think that it's tough to say which I like better, but Warren Beatty in here I think is also like really, really good. And Faye Dunaway, of course, is great as well. The costume design is great. There's just a lot to like about this film, and I do think that it's the definitive version of this story, and I don't think that any other version will be able to top it. It's a very experimental film, so do know that going into this, but it changed Hollywood, and in my opinion, I think that to this day holds up, and that's why I love this film. Next up, another new wave Hollywood film. We have 5 Easy Pieces, which came out in 1970, and I am so glad that I, watch Academy Award Best Picture nominees, like how I have like a ranking list that I'm doing in terms of like focusing on each decade, and I'm almost done the 1970s as of the filming of this video, which is again September 14th of 2024. I just have like 2 left, but 5 Easy Pieces I didn't really hear about until I saw that it got nominated for Best Picture in 1970, and I watched it, and I just wasn't in the right headspace. Like, I was like, it's solid, but I was like, you know what? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, I thought that it was like a really interesting film, especially with how it ended. So I decided to pick it up on Criterion Blu-ray, and when I rewatched it, it really like it clicked. Like, all the things that I was like, I should like this film, but when I saw it for a second time, all those things that I love about films really clicked. Like, it's a flat character arc. It's a film that's also dealing with, characters that don't have the best relationship with family. It's also got an ending that is ambiguous, but at the same time, like, really well done. It's got a very interesting long take that ends the film. It's not the most likable character, like, for sure. Like, the character is not, but that's the point. This film isn't supposed to depict someone that is, like, all lovable. This is depicting someone that is quite hateable. In particular, the infamous restaurant scene. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But this is it's a very, very good film. And I'm glad that I did it on Blu-ray because I look forward to rewatching it many more times. But yeah, that was my number 2 of 5. Speaking of flat character arc, this is a film I'm about to talk about that also similar to like The Master, which is in my top 100 favorite films of all time. Similar to The Master, when I saw both films around the same time, they introduced me to the flat character arc. And that film is Shame, which came out in 2011. It is an NC-17 film, so know that going into the film. It's not an easy watch. It is very somber, like, holy cow, like, it could probably cause depression, like, somber. It is not for everyone, like, in the slightest. It is depicting sexual addiction, and it does so in a very, 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 very nuanced way. Like, this film is incredible. Steve McQueen's directing, Michael Fassbender's performance, the score, the beginning and ending tying in beautifully. It's a very, very well done film. Highly recommend it to adventurous film goers. Next up, we have what might be my favorite Tim Burton film. I go back and forth between this and Sweeney Todd, but I decided to go with this, and that is Ed Wood, which came out in 1994, and it's all about filmmaking. In particular, a filmmaker by the name of Ed Wood, who wasn't a good filmmaker by any means, but he was somebody that really loves the art of filmmaking, and I just love how this film really tackles that. It's very good comedy, but it's also a film that has very interesting characters. Like, the kooky nature of them really fits Tim Burton's brand, but it's also got a Howard Shore score that is really good. Just an overall very likable film, and it's one that I've seen twice, and I've been having an itch to rewatch it recently, so I'm looking forward to watching it again, but I love Ed Wood. Next up, we have a film that I first saw, I think it was 2015, and I've rewatched it over the years. I keep coming back to it, and I finally saw it in theaters, my most recent viewing, which was last year. And that film is Under the Skin, which stars Scarlett Johansson, and it is one of the best art house films of the 2010s. I think that it is great how this film, I can watch it like once a year, and every time that I watch it, I get something new out of it. And also, the film also has a lot to do with like the mood that you're in, because if you're in the mood for like some high energy level of filmmaking, this isn't that. Like, this is a slow burn, but I just love how this film I can come back to multiple times and just get something different out of it, and also pick up on new things with how, the symbolism will, mean certain things, and also the themes that are tackled. So I love Under the Skin. It's not for everyone, but in terms of art house filmmaking, if you like that, I would highly recommend this. And last but not least, we have The Fountain, which stars Hugh Jackman, Rachel Weisz. This is a film that it bombed at the box office when it came out, and I think it was 2006. And it's understandably so, because it's a film that's taking place over the course of like 3 different decades. And those 3 different decades are very different from one another. That's all I'll say. And it's also a film that's tackling religion, spiritualism, death. It's a very deep film. Like, it's handling a lot, and it's only 96 minutes, and it's tackling all of this in that short runtime. But like, for 96 minutes, I was highly engaged. And I also just love how, similar to Under the Skin, I have a different viewing experience each time. But throughout all the viewings, I've loved this film, and I keep coming back to it. It's one of my favorite Darren Aronofsky films. It has quickly climbed the list of one of my favorites of his, and I just think it's a really, really good film that unfortunately doesn't get talked about enough, but I love this film. But yeah, that's my number 201 and 250, guys. Look forward to my other 2 parts that I will be releasing soon. The next part will be my number 200 to 151, and then, of course, my 150 to 101. So stay tuned for those parts. But, guys, let me know your favorite films of all time in the comment section down below. I do look forward to talking about that down below. And as always, I appreciate you guys for watching. Don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me down on Letterboxd, Patreon, and I will catch you guys later.